Welcome to the Spa Girls podcast. Each week we bring you the best self-publishing tips, tools and resources for authors. I'm Shah Barrett.
Cheryl Phipps. I'm Trudy J, and we have no Wendy this week, but we do have a fantastic guest. We've got Maggie Dallen. Hello.
Hey Maggie.
Hi, Maggie.
Hello.
Hi. So
Hi.
Maggie is actually, I don't even know how to encapsulate it into one easy little thing. So we're just gonna talk to Maggie about stuff and
all the things.
all the things that she's done to get her. This we were just talking about this to top 30 on the on Amazon store.
Today.
Like overall, like that's amazing. Well done.
That is huge.
Thank you.
Yeah. So well done. But so first, before we go into the questions, I'm going to read your bio out, and then we'll dig a bit further into that and how you got there and where it's all going. Maggie Dallen writes sweet, light-hearted romances for readers looking for a feel-good escape. Her Regency romance and young adult series are the book version of bubblegum pop. They're high on laughs, low on angst, and contain no sex or swearing, so good for all ages. She lives in Montana with her family and spends most of her time living in a fantasy world. Don't we all? Don't we all?
It's true.
So Maggie, the first thing I'd love to know is how you got into writing and self-publishing. Like, where did you start? Where did it all come from?
So I finished my first book in 2002. So a really long time ago, right after college. I finished it. I got an agent. I had this like dream scenario happen right away. And then it just like went like this instantly. Like no one bought it. Nothing happened. It wasn't good. I went back and reread it. I'm like, this is a terrible book. But it started a lot. But I think it was enough validation with that first one though that it kept me going for a long time. That little hint of validation was enough to make me like maybe I can get there.
What year was that?
2002.
2002.
Yeah. So that was a long time ago that I wrote my first book. And then I kept at it and I kept writing and I kept writing. And then after that, I started taking a lot of writing classes and working on craft and doing all the things to actually write a good book. That's key. And so I did a lot of that. And then cut to when Kindle came around. And then finally I was like, oh, I can actually publish a book. And I think what happened weirdly at the same time, I got a 6-book deal with a romance, an ebook first romance thing. I don't want to name them because I'm probably going to badmouth them, so I won't say names. But it was an ebook first thing, and it was kind of I was very excited about it, but at the same time, I was just starting to dip my toes into self-publishing. This was around like 2014 or so, and I was just like dabbling in it and didn't really know what I was doing. But by the time I got to book 4 of that 6-book romance series, I was like, oh man, I've made a mistake. I should be doing self-publishing. I realized it at that point. I was just like, even dabbling in it, I was like, I really, they were giving me covers that I didn't like and I had no say in it. They were, they didn't know how to market it. At that point, I didn't have a big audience by any means. I had almost no audience, but I was interacting with readers. And I was like, well, no, I know what they want this. And I felt like no one at the publishing company cared there was just that disconnect there. And so after that, as soon as that contract was done, I put all my efforts into self-publishing. And I went full time with it in 2016 and actually started making like a good 6-figure income starting like 2018. I never looked back. That's how I got started. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love that. So, and what made you decide? Oh, sorry. Go on. No, what made you decide? So the genre that you're writing in, and how did you get to sort of, sweet romances?
Well, when I first started, I wrote everything. Like basically in the early days, I wrote absolutely everything, and I made every mistake under the sun in the early days. Like I was just like, put a steampunk novella here, and a YA thing here, and a spicy cowboy here. It didn't even make sense. I was just having fun. And I still like to do that. I mean, I have 3 active pen names right now. I've killed off more pen names than I care to admit because I just couldn't get them going. Yeah, and so I really enjoy. I'm one of those people are always like, write what you read, and I'm like, well, that makes no sense to me because I read everything and I like to write everything. Well, I mean, mostly under romance, but I like to read and write everything across the board. I get really bored very quickly. So I still, I have a pen name with Melissa Pearl. She was on your shout out too long ago, and we do Sweet Cowboys. And I have a closed pen name that I do. It's a steamy historical, and I do think so. I still try to do everything, but at this point, there's only so many hours in the day. So I realized that I need to focus, but it's hard to focus when you just like to, you're like, but it's fun. I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, but I did get slightly better at narrowing it down and at least creating different pen names for the more, the super different things.
Yeah. So you've got the 3 active pen names, and
Mm-hmm.
you've been making 6 figures since 2018. So what are some of the let's call the core things that you're doing? What was your process? So I think at that point you were it was the front list. It was relying on publishing new books regularly. So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah.
How many a year and that sort of thing?
Oh yeah. So from the very beginning, the only thing that really worked for me was publishing often. And the good thing, one of my good skills is that I'm a quick writer. I used to be a ghostwriter. I used to be a reporter for a breaking news thing. So I'd have to write quickly. So I had this background of being able to write very quickly and pretty clean copy, so that I used that to my advantage in the beginning in 2015, 2016, 2017. I was just churning like the wind, like just crazy amounts. Like I would write like 2 books a month and was putting out like 24 books a year. And
so
it was a little bit
how
nuts.
many words each, like of 2 books a month?
I mean, I remember one year I would keep track because I had this like competition going with myself of how many words I could write a month. I'm very weirdly competitive with myself like that. And, so like there were several years in a row where it was like a million words a year at least. And
wow.
Yeah. So I was really into it. But the problem with that is I never learned how to sell what I already had out there. So my entire business model was based on putting out new releases. That was the only way. Like, so I had a that I got myself on quite the hamster wheel with Amazon and KU, and just be always needing, if I took my foot off the gas for half a second, my sales would just start to plummet because they were completely based on new release. And then I kind of hit a breaking point with that in about like 2019, early 2020. I was pushing myself so hard. Like I was making decent money, but I was plateauing. And it sounds like a spoiled brat saying that, being like, oh, I was so unhappy with my 6-figure income. but I was just trying, but I was trying to see some kind of like progress because I was working hard, and it was getting more and more competitive in the market. So I felt like I was working harder and harder and harder and putting out more, starting more pad days, doing more and more and more, and just going like until I felt like I wasn't just a hamster on the wheel. I was just like running, sprinting on this wheel, trying to, and I was really wearing myself out. And then finally, I think it was 2019, somewhere around there, I had this year where I was like, finally, I saw this big profit, and I was like, yes, that's what I was trying to do. And then I get this call from my CPA, my accountant, and telling me that I have this giant tax bill, and basically took me right back down to exactly what I made the year before. And I had this breaking point where I was just like, I'm so tired, and I can't get ahead. I just felt like I was just constantly, and I have anxiety issues, and I had this like major panic attack. And I basically hit a wall, and I'm very into like the woo-woo stuff. And I was reading this book at the time that was this Gabby Bernstein book that's like The Universe Has Your Back, I think it's called, or something like that. And I happened to be reading that at the time, and then I had this panic, and it was just one of those kind of like come to Jesus moments for me. I was like, something's got to give. I can't keep doing this. I can't work any harder. I can't put out any more. And I need to I want to spend time with my family. I want to see my kid. I want to hang, I want to relax and stop pushing all the time. So I let go. I kind of made the decision. There's this thing in that Gabby Bernstein book where she's like, if you're either living in fear or in love, and you're either trusting or controlling, basically, and so I was like, I'm going to make the decision. I'm just going to trust and let go and relax. And it's amazing because as soon as I did that, I actually canceled a whole line that I was supposed to do, a whole series for my Sweet Regency that I was supposed to put out that summer. I just canceled that, took the pressure off, decided I was going to hang with my kid for the summer and relax. And then all of a sudden things turned around on their own without me trying. And one of them was the Sophia Quinn pen name. You guys talked to Melissa Pearl about that. We got that going, which was profitable right out of the gate. And but the big one for me was I found screenwriting, which I'm not sure if you want to go into that yet or whatever, but okay, I could go in there. I wasn't sure. So because I had time, I mean, not tons, I was still keeping things going, but I suddenly I had enough time and bandwidth that when this ad came across my Facebook feed, I'd been thinking, years ago before that, somebody had mentioned like, oh, you should try screenwriting. And I was like, it's so interesting, but who has the time? But then I had the time because I let myself just be, and I was just started following things that made my heart happy. I started following my passion again, which I hadn't been doing for years. And so when this ad came up, it was for this school called Story Summit, which I love. The guy who runs it is the former president of Paramount Pictures, David Kirkpatrick, and he's awesome. And he's a really great guy. But and when I found them, they were very new. It was like a few years ago, and they're only like 4 years old, I think, or something. So it was very new. And I just found this close-knit, awesome group of people that were, and I got to work with like the best mentors and the best teachers and take all these classes. And it felt like such a good fit right out of the gate. Like I was telling a friend, I was like, after so many years in the publishing industry of feeling like I was running up the down escalator, it was like I suddenly hopped on the right escalator, like things just kept falling into place, and it was just like, this is how it should be with ease, and like a producer was interested in one of my scripts and I signed a couple of shopping agreements and things were going really well. But then in the end, I'd started the pen name with Melissa and I'd started another close pen name that was actually good, making money, and things were just going well, except the only problem was in doing the screenwriting, I'd managed to add one more business on top of my so it was like, oh man, I'm supposed to be slowing down. And instead, now I'm back to having like way too much on my plate. But what happened, which was kind of a blessing in disguise in hindsight for me, was that strike happened, which with the Writers Guild and the Screen Actors Guild, there was a big strike. So all of this forward momentum kind of came to a halt. And while that was obviously disappointing because I'd been making progress and things were good, it was actually kind of one of those moments where I was like, oh, this is meant to be, because now I have the time to figure out how to actually rearrange my business so I can have a life and do screenwriting and, maintain my business. And so that's how I found my good friend Anne Marie Meyer is really into direct sales, and she's actually the one who I adapted her book into a screenplay, and that's the one that sold, which is really cool. But she was really into direct sales, and she was working with this guy Cameron Snow, and so I reached out to Cameron Snow, and he has been helping me. He got me set up with Shopify and doing the stores, and he taught me a ton about advertising, and and I'm happy to report that a year later my income has shifted primarily so from being so frontlist heavy to be majority being backlist, which is really cool.
That's awesome. So
yeah.
So that was what you were doing. You were trying to give yourself a bit more time and a bit more space from being that frontlist focused and always just being on that hamster wheel to kind of having this income from. How many books have you got now? If you were writing that many,
I mean, I overall between ghostwriting and all the books that I over all the pen names, it's around 200.
Wow.
I think I actually, it's a lot. It's a lot. But that was the stupid thing. It was like, I have so many books, why can't I sell them? You know what I mean? It's like, this is, and a friend of mine was like, why do you keep putting out books if you can't sell the ones you have? And I was like, that's a really good question, And so
only a close friend could ask that question.
Yeah, I know. It's like, oh, way to just sell it out, Yeah. But it was a good, accurate question, and it got me thinking for a long time. But there was a long period of time there where I knew that something had to change, where I knew that I needed to learn how to sell them, but I didn't know how. And so figuring, pairing up with Cameron and learning advertising and learning direct sales and all that kind of stuff has been really, that's what I needed, But I think, and I don't think it's for everyone, honestly, it's like, that's the thing about this whole business is that I don't think there's one way for anyone ever. It's like everyone I know who's at all successful is doing their own thing and finding their own ways to get there. But for me personally, having so many books, it's been really good. It's been a good way to like just keep the backlist moving so that it's, like a stable base every month that I can build on rather than, which is what it should be, right? I mean, that's what we always think it's going to be when you first start out, but it's not that easy to do,
Yeah. So what are some of the main differences in how you're approaching things? Is it literally just that you're selling direct now, or is there a different mindset around it as well? Or do we just...
Yeah, I think it's definitely a different mindset for me. I've had to really shift out of I've had to shift out of being so frontless, crazy, and feeling like everything's going to fall apart if I don't put out a book all the time. And so I've slowed way down, and the slower I go, the more I feel like I'm being rewarded by the universe or something. I don't know, but it's like, okay, no, but I'm focusing much more now on quality and making sure it's something I feel really good at, and marketability too, but quality and marketability, and making sure from the get-go that I know how to sell what I'm working on. And also, I am looking at backlist things, being like, how can I sell this? What can I do for this? But I'm finding this balance right now. Excuse me one sec, I'm going to cough here, guys.
I know just how she feels.
Sorry, she'll be back in a moment. She's just having a quick glass of water for anyone not watching on YouTube.
Okay, thanks. Sorry for that, guys.
No problem.
I warned them ahead of time. I was like, I'm gonna have to take coughing breaks. What was I even saying? Oh no, I forgot. Oh yeah. Being so frontless focused and working on quality, and yeah. So I think it's been a shift. It's been a big change, having to try to put that trust that it's like it's going to be if you write something really good and you do the right steps, you can make money and it's okay, and it's definitely a big change in mentality. And sometimes, I feel like really unproductive some weeks because I'm not getting nearly as, there was a long period of time where I valued my time was, if I wasn't getting words on the page, then I felt like I wasn't productive at all, and I've had to really change that mentality. And I still do try to keep a consistent, writing schedule, mainly for my own, just so that my sanity. I'm not happy if I'm not writing, honestly. I'm kind of like a compulsive writer like that. So I want to be writing, but I've also had to change the way I look at it so that I'm not just, it's like, it's still valuable. If I take a whole day to be working on advertising and marketing and doing these things, like that's okay. If I take a day to just relax because I need to, that's okay. It's just, like, I feel like sometimes I'm like a Workaholics Anonymous. I'm like, it's okay to be like, you're allowed to take a downtime.
Isn't it interesting how we get that mindset and we sort of telling ourselves this is the only way it can happen, or this is the way I have to do it. We get ourselves on the hamster wheel. And I really do remember there was a point in self-publishing where the common knowledge, in quote marks, was that you had to be putting out lots and lots of books, and that was the only way that you were going to be able to make a living at it. Like writing one book a year or 2 books a year was never going to be enough. And now we kind of know that that's okay, and you do what you need to do, whether it's lots of books or not, and you can
and we talk about our process as well. And the thing we have to understand with our process is that it can change, and sometimes it should change because new things come along that make life easier. I'll stop talking now.
No, but I also think it's the health, not just the physical health, but the mental health. And I think I just admire you so much, Maggie, for getting off that hamster wheel, because we have talked to so many authors that have been on that and that have really almost been fallen off the wheel due to health as a result of that hamster wheel, So physically, and backs and hands and wrists and all of that, let alone the whole anxiety loop. I totally get that.
It's hard to get off when you don't see it. I think that's part of like the catch-22 of it, right? Where it's like you can't even slow down enough to look at other options because you're so caught up in that thing, which that was where I was at for such a long time, where I was like, I know there must be a way, but I don't even have the time or the bandwidth to like look for another way out of this, so it was a big learning curve there. And it's been a big learning curve for the last few years. I feel like I was telling a friend the other day, I was like, I've been spending so much time outside of my comfort zone that I'm starting to feel like I live in the land of discomfort. Like I'm just between screenwriting and direct sales. And then, Cameron's got me doing all these ads lately that are very much outside of my comfort zone. Like it's like me talking to the camera, things like that I never thought I'd do. And just, I don't know, I'm trying to embrace being uncomfortable here, because I feel like that's where the progress has been. And anytime you're going to take any new steps, it means a whole lot of fails and learning and mistakes. And, it's just, Yeah. Unfortunately.
It's cool though, right? Like that, and it takes
It
a lot of
is.
bravery
It
to
is.
actually be able to do that. So it's awesome.
It is. Yeah. And I think, I think I would definitely never have made any progress if I hadn't made all these mistakes that I've made over the years. And I often, a friend of mine who's not in publishing was like, you should write a book. I'm like, first of all, I have nothing new to say about publishing. But second of all, mine would be what not to do if I ever wrote a book, because I made every mistake, like every mistake. I don't even know how I did it sometimes. I'm like, wow, way to go. You made that mistake and that mistake and that mistake. But at the same time, I'm like, it got me where I am, and that is good, And my son has this card game called Would You Rather, and bear with me, I swear I have a point. Yeah, it's called Would You Rather, and then you ask somebody the question, and then they get to vote on your answer. And the question he asked me was, would you rather be up to bat in the championship game and miss the ball, or watch from the sidelines? And he voted that I would say watch from the sidelines, and I got super offended, even though, he's 7 years old, so he didn't, it was not it wasn't really his fault. But I was like, no. And then it led to this whole conversation, though, that the only way you're ever going to learn is to go up to bat, and the only way you have a chance of winning is if you're up at bat and you're in the game, and you got to play the game, and if you're ever going to win, and no one's ever learned anything from sitting on the sideline. So I gave him this whole lecture, and in the back of my head, I'm like, yeah, that's basically my philosophy of life. I'm like summed up right there in a little kid's game called Would You Rather.
That's awesome.
But it's true.
That's so true.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
That's why I'm like, I don't know many people I have more rejection letters and fails in my history of the 20 something years I've been doing this than anyone I know. But at the same time, I'm like, that makes me a champion, because I wish we celebrated failures more, honestly, because I feel like that's awesome. And I'm a bad offender of that, because I go on social media and I'm like only shouting about the wins. So I know I'm we all do that. We shout about the wins, and no one's shouting about our fails. But I wish we could kind of change that, I wish we could kind of be like, look what I tried and didn't do well at. Ooh,
But you already suffered through the journey once. You don't need to.
Right. Yeah, we don't need everyone to know about it. But, I don't know. As a society, I wish we were more like, yay, go you for trying,
It's true.
Yeah. It's kind of a human frailty, I guess, is the idea that we don't really want to have to put our vulnerabilities out there. We're happy to kind of, or at least we feel like we shouldn't celebrate them, maybe. And you're celebrating the successes, but maybe we should be. I don't know. It's a hard one.
It is tough.
So there's that change of mindset and giving yourself the space and time to actually go, hey, this is this thing. Do you feel like it was like, did you sit and look around and go, okay, what are my options to focus on the backlist, or did it just sort of come your way because you were friends with Anne-Marie?
It kind of came my way as the answer. I feel like I'd been kind of asking the question to the universe for a while. At that point, I've been kind of like, okay, screenwriting seems to be going well. But at that point, I hadn't sold the script yet, and I still needed to keep my book income steady. So and I was like, something's got to give me the answer. And then, right around that same time, Anne-Marie was coming to me being like, this is awesome. Check this out. You've got such a huge backlist. You should try this. And then I was like, no way. And then there was a little voice in the back of my head being like, you asked for an answer, and like, here it is. Here's the way that you could sell your backlist. And it might be, again, it was one of those like jumping into the unknown is always terrifying. But for me, it worked really well. It's been, and then I think I learned a lot through that process, just working with Cameron on advertising and marketing copy. And then I feel like, with the new release doing well, which had nothing to do with direct sales, honestly, because it was in Kindle Unlimited. But I think a lot of that is just lessons learned transferring over, being able to understand like what's, good marketing copy and know how to push things right out of the bat rather than what I had been doing in the past, I guess, which is like, I think a lot of it for me was learning the difference between what I think is fun and clever and whatever, and what readers connect with, or what they want to hear. Like,
and so could you distill that down for us? What is it that you've learned?
yeah, I think for me, like when I would go to write, I would write it from the point of view of what I like, and I tend to get like too clever or too whatever, and then and so I mean sometimes it's the same, I guess, but I want them to just like the book because I like the book, you know? And I think there's that element where it's kind of like, you should like it because it is. And oh, one thing I'm learning is that, like, no, you have to show, it's more of like the show versus tell kind of thing, you know, where it's
Yeah.
like, no, show them the emotions that they're going to be getting when they read this. Show, you know, really get them engaged with it so they feel it. And, you know, it's a decision that they have to make. It's going to be based on emotion if they hit buy or not. It's going to be like, do I want that emotion? Yes or no, basically. You know, I think that's what
Mm.
drives most romance readers, especially, is if you can get their heart into it, you know. But yeah, and I think when I first started, I've always been, I mean, I think most authors are probably like, I don't like to sell, you know, because
Mm.
I mean, we all are people that are like, I choose to make a living sitting in my pajamas on a couch, like talking to imaginary people. Like, I think it's safe to say most authors are not like born salespeople, you
Mm.
know? I feel like, or I'm sure some are, but for me personally, I'm an introvert and I hate being on the internet. Like, I mean, I'm not really, it's not like an organic natural trait for me, you know, that being a salesperson. So it's definitely was a steep learning curve there. Um, but yeah, I think it was one worth learning for sure.
Yeah, 100%. That's a hard learned thing too. Like to separate yourself from the book, which you've,
Hmm.
you know, blood, sweat, and tears creation of that story, that of a romance between two people that you know, or more people if it's whatever. But you know, and then step away from that and actually think about how to encourage readers to want to read your book, and that's a whole different thing, isn't it? And
Yeah, it
that's
really is its own art form. Yeah.
yeah, and it is very hard for a lot of us to do that. So that is a steep learning curve. So are you all in, so you've got some stuff in KU and some stuff wide? Is that, how does it all work?
Yeah,
You know?
I'm mostly wide at this point. And then because of the Shopify stuff and selling direct, you have to be wide for that. This new release, I have something strategically in KU. For me, I have nothing. I have nothing against KU. You know, like I used to be KU all the way, but now I've started to look at KU as like a tool in the toolbox rather than
Yeah.
like my entire toolbox, which is what it was when I was doing rapid releasing all the time, you know.
Yeah.
So now the new release I did in KU because I really wanted to tap into that audience. It had been a while since I'd released anything into KU for YA, and I wanted to hit like a new audience and a broader audience with this one. So I decided to release in KU and hit it hard because I hadn't released one in that genre in a while, and I'm not sure when I'm going to again because there's been a lot on my plate. So I'm like, well, if this is my one for the year, I better give it all I've got.
Mm.
And I did a lot of work on on the ads and putting together, and Cameron was very nicely helpful in putting together a strategy and all that stuff. So yeah, and it worked. It worked great.
Is it a standalone or,
Yeah, it's a standalone.
and what
So
genre?
everyone says those don't sell it. I'm like, it does. YA, sweet YA.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah.
actually thinking, as I'm talking about this, that I've missed a step
Oh,
in
okay.
terms of your process. So can you go back to the beginning? So Anne-Marie says, oh cool, there's this new thing, you should totally try it, and then so you decide to try it. So what did you do? Like, did you just immediately set up your direct store off your website? How did that all work? And did you immediately see success, or what was the learning curve?
Yeah, I pretty much immediately set up a store and then hired Cameron right around the same time. And I followed his instructions to set it up. And then I was pretty lucky when I started was like a good time to start. I think there's like seasons in Facebook, it feels like, where it's like, you know, sometimes they're more competitive than others. And I started and it was and I actually had pretty good luck right out of the gate. I never hit the heights of some of my friends. Some of my friends who've been doing it are really killing it, like really just scaling way up and doing all these like amazing things. And I never really got to that level, but I've found a sweet spot for myself, which is not spending a ton, but the ads, at the very least, the ads pay for themselves with Shopify, sometimes make a profit. But what they do is they drive people to Amazon too. Because people, if they're an Amazon buyer, they're an Amazon buyer. So even if the link is for my Shopify store, then they'll still go find me on Amazon or Apple or whatever. So the nice thing has been that I've seen my sales just become much steadier and higher on all of the platforms. And then when I make a phone, profit on Shopify as well, that's a sweet, like, yay. And then it was going so well that I ended up starting a second store for just my YA stuff, because I didn't want to mix historical and YA. So now I have two stores going, and same goes for both of them. They're both kind of, I've got them both to a place where they're kind of just nicely moving in the background. I don't spend an insane amount of time. I did in the beginning. In the beginning, it was a lot of trial and error and testing and learning. And now I've kind of gotten to a nice place where it's a lot more just like upkeep and maintenance, and occasionally like a big overhaul if things have just stopped working and I need to fix it or whatever. But for the most part, it's gotten just like they pay for themselves. These ads pay for themselves, and they make me a nice profit in different, the different retailers. And that buys me the time. Like now I no longer have that fear of taking my foot off the gas, because if I do, I've got a nice steady baseline with my backlist now, thanks to that advertising. So yeah, it's been good. And I've been trying to expand on that a little bit, just what other backlisting, what else can I try and experiment to make more money off of? I've just started doing, just investing money in making audiobooks off of one of the series that's selling really well right now, to have another stream of income, and just trying to diversify more and more in ways that don't make me feel like I am being torn in 8 million different directions, because there's always that, and it's like, wait, too many things going on,
Yeah. Just for anybody listening, just to insert quickly, I've just quickly looked at while we were talking, Cameron's authors directsales.com, which is his website, but I'll also link to Anne Marie's Facebook group, which is excellent for authors. Heaps of free information in there, and people sharing their stories, and it's Babes, isn't it? I can't quite remember that, but I'll put the link in the show notes. So
perfect. Yes. She is actually currently on the set of the movie, and I'm flying out on Friday. I'm excited to meet her there so that I can be on set too. So it's pretty exciting.
So cool.
So tell us a little bit about that. Like, so it's you did the screenplay of one of Anne Marie's books, and then there's a story around it that it's happening really fast. Can you tell us that? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Sorry, you guys broke up there for me for a half a second there. So
sorry.
What was the question again? Sorry.
I was just saying, like, tell us the story around the screenplay that is now being made into a film. Like, I think tell us how it happened.
Okay. So Story Summit, awesome group, met the greatest people in the world. I've worked with the best mentors ever. I started writing. I adapted one of my own books, and then I wrote a couple of originals, and at one point I was like, I want to write something that I feel like will really sell, like a super marketable, because it's really hard to sell a script, and I remember when Anne Marie wrote this book, Christmasland. I'm not sure how much I'm allowed to say about it, so I'm going to keep it vague a little bit here. But I read the blurb when she first put it out and was like, man, that is the best idea. Like, I read it, it was just like, oh, it's one of those, like, I wish I'd thought of that. It's such a good premise, so good. And so when I started thinking about like a really marketable Christmas movie that I want to write, I instantly thought of that book. And I reached out to her, and Anne Marie and I, we co-wrote a series together, and we've been working together in some capacity or other for a while. So I went to her and was just like, hey, would you mind if I could take a stab at adapting this? And she was like, have at it. And I was like, okay, cool. So I did. And then, right out of the gate, that one got really good feedback. People seem to really like it, because I think the hard thing about Christmas romance is that there's so many of them that have been made in, these kind of movies, that it's hard to find a different take, on a premise. It's very difficult to be like, they want, like the same but different kind of thing, and it's hard to find that different, fresh take on that, just because there's so many that have already been done, so I think people saw right away that this was one that was like, oh, it's a fresh spin on Christmas holiday romance kind of thing. So and so that one, actually, we got a lot of interest and things were going well with it, and then the strike happened, so that was a big bummer for that one. But then as soon as the strike ended, and kind of the producer we were working with, we had a shopping agreement with him, and he started sending it out again, and it's happened really quickly. I feel like everything just was like boom, 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 and they,
Wow.
Doesn't it
So now
normally
it's being
take
made.
a long time to get from there to there? So
Yeah.
how did you get so quickly from
Yeah,
accepted
there
to
were extenuating circumstances that they were looking for something that, like, for this year. It was kind of like they needed something, and I think was what I got from that. So it did happen, and the the script was kind of like ready to go. It had been, and so yeah, it did happen very
really
fast. But
fast? That's
yeah,
awesome. Look, will it be? I
yeah,
mean, I don't know how this scheduling thing works, but is this a movie that might be out in time for Christmas this year? Is that the plan?
yes, it's supposed to be
Oh,
out for
wow.
Christmas this year. But that's all I'm allowed to say. I'm not allowed to say anything else.
Okay,
Well,
that's all right.
Anne-Marie's
So
Anne-Marie's
future.
I'm like,
excited
I'm thinking in
too.
my head, I'm like, what else can I say? No, I think that's it. Yeah, that's all.
That's
It's
cool.
all right.
That's exciting.
Future Sharon in December 2024 will put a note in the show notes.
Follow up.
And watch the movie. Yeah. That's
Perfect.
exciting.
That sounds good. Yeah.
All right, well, let's skip back to
Okay.
'cause what intrigues me about direct sales, and always has done, and I don't know if you have a theory on this, but you have the sales on your website, and usually people are doing Facebook ads to send people to your website to buy those books, but it jumps sales on all the other platforms, like you're saying, like that's actually where you're making your money. So why is that? How does that work?
I don't really know, honestly, but I do know that there are some authors who are making like good profits on their story. I don't want to make it sound like that's the only way to make money. This is my experience in particular. I know there are some people who are really making great money on Shopify itself, and kudos to them. And I can make decent money, but I feel like I still have loads to learn, I'm sure. But for me, what I'm finding is people, if they're seeing the book, they're seeing the name of the book that they want, and then they just go look that up on Amazon, or they look it up on Google, or they look it up on Apple. And I think that's the thing I'm starting to realize after being with Amazon, being solely Amazon focused for so long. I feel like the direct sales thing has been a really good way to kind of take 10 steps back and kind of like de-brainwash a little bit. It's like, it's so much of what we've learned as authors has been because of Kindle and KDP being the early thing. It's like so much of like what Amazon has trained us to believe, you know what I mean? That it's like there's only one way to reach these these readers. And it's kind of like, no, I think readers are pretty smart. Readers are like, oh, I see a book that I want, I'll just go get it. You know what I mean? Like we don't need to, they're not going to be confused if you write in different genres. I mean, it's something like Amazon gets confused if you write in different genres. They might get confused about who to show it to, but readers are smart enough to look at the covers and be like, oh, that's YA contemporary and that's Regency, like and these are the kind of things that I'm like, we've kind of learned these lessons, I think, that are, and rapid release is one of them. Like, I got it ingrained in me that the only way to keep, there's these cliffs and I have to make sure that I have something new before it falls off a cliff and blah, blah, blah. And I don't know. I think a lot of it for me lately has been, kind of just like getting rid of those old ideas of like how it has to be, and thinking outside the box a little bit, and I'm looking at it as myself as like, as a reader, I know if I read somebody that I like, I will find them. I will find all of the books that they've ever written, and I will track them down. So part of me is like, just get in front of, just give them one book that they will love, and then they will find you again, or just find a way to get in front of them and intrigue them, and they will find your book on whatever platform that they use. And this is kind of the way I'm looking at it now, is less of a desperate, like, get myself right in front of your face, and more of a like, if I can like show you that I've got something good, you will come to me kind of thing, and I guess it's going with that woo-woo stuff that I believe in, which is like, if you build it, they will come. Like, if you write a good story, they will find you. Not that I don't put in a ton of work, but but at the same time, I'm less worried about, I'm like, if you can attract them, then they will find you wherever they like to read. I think that's what it seems to be proving.
And if we're going to go woo, let's go woo. The energy of kind of like, I've got to put another book out and I've got to get more going. It's very sort of desperate and worried, and versus the idea of like, I'm going to write an awesome book and I'm going to put all my energy into that, and people are going to find me. I'm going to find it, and because it's an awesome book, it's going to be easier to advertise it and easier to find people and all these things. It's almost like there's a sense that I don't want, and I don't want to shame anyone or anything like that. I don't mean this, but I'm just like, when we're trying to get more books out and do more, it's almost like we don't have confidence in ourselves or something. That there's like I have to write another book because that book wasn't good enough or something. Like there's that kind of a sense to it. Do you think that that's something that you've had to kind of let go of and move towards? Is that
Yeah, definitely. I think one thing that I realized while doing this was like a weird block thing for me was that I think one of the reasons I always moved on to the next one is because I always would look at the one that I'd written and be like, oh, it's not good enough. Like, it didn't hit exactly what I wanted it to, and it wasn't what I wanted. It's like didn't match this perfect idea in my head of what it was going to be. So, you know what? I'm just going to like forget about it and move on to the next. And that's like how the business for me just started turning into well, next one's going to be better. Next one's going to be better. Next one, and it's like really, it's probably never going to be exactly perfect. And so you just have to, and you could try your best for perfection, but it's probably never going to be absolutely perfect. There's always going to be something that you're like, oh, I should have done that different, but yeah, I think that's definitely a part of it. And I also am like, I don't regret that I did the churn and burn method as long as I did. I really don't, because I also feel like there's a time and a place for that. I think like when I first started, as I said before, I think I'm a really slow learner. And like it took me many books to figure things out. I had to write many books before I even feel like I halfway nailed it with like character development, and I had to write even more books before I feel like I really understood the structure. And I had to write even more books after that before I got like the really stylistic, like my voice down pat. And I think for me, I learned, I mean, I don't, like we were talking about before, like I think, we should all be celebrating the struggles more, and while that period of time is like, I don't really want to go back to that model by any means, but where I was then as a writer and even where I was in life, like I had the energy for it for years. Like if you told me to slow down, I wouldn't have wanted to. Like I was like riding this high on the energy for a while. The only problem was when I started getting exhausted and just like didn't want to be doing it anymore. That's when it became a problem. But there was a while there where I actually loved. I had all of these story ideas and I just wanted to put them, I couldn't get them down fast enough. And I was like learning the craft as I went, and it was so exciting. And so I don't regret any of that. And like you said, there's no shaming anyone who is doing that, because I think that's an excellent way to learn a ton, is by doing the rapid release thing, and, there's a big part of me that's like, that was exactly what I needed to be doing for those years. And now I have this backlist that I can do whatever I want with and hopefully make money off of it for a long time to come. And, so I'm starting to look at them as assets, and yes, I am discovering that there's some books that might need to be revised and rewritten as I'm doing this process as well. But yeah, I don't know. I think there was a time and a place for that. And that's, if there's anybody listening or watching this that's still in that, then that might be where you need to be. I've talked to authors who they're like writing their first book and they're ready to like, oh, am I going to sell? And I'm like, maybe the first book is not the one that you sell. You know what I mean? Maybe you need to write. Maybe it is, because maybe not everyone has to write 200 books before they feel like they know what they're doing. But maybe you don't have to go to that extent either. But I do feel like, the more you write, the better you get and the more you learn. And there's something to be said for that. So, I'm grateful that I did that, but I'm also grateful that I'm moving on from that.
Yeah, that's true. It's kind of what Cher said before. It's like the progression of your career. You can move from one thing to another, and it can be all the perfect way to do it. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about direct sales. Is there anything that you can tell us about doing direct sales? Any kind of, like, was it really hard to get into it initially and took time, or how does that all work? Like, what were...
It did take me more. Yeah, it took me time for sure to get it all up and started. It was quite a bit, and that was one of those reasons where I'm like, it was kind of good. Wasn't good for anyone else in Hollywood, so I hate saying that, but it was good for me when the strike happened, because it was like, oh, now I have all this time, because of suddenly all the conversations and things that were going on, like, went silent, and it gave me this time, and I slowed down my writing schedule. So it definitely was a time investment, and it's more of like a front end thing because a lot of it is just setting that stuff up. So it takes a while to set things up and get it all in place. And then once it's in place, then you're good, you know. So it's more of like an upfront time investment. And there was some money investment involved with that too, because everything costs money, you know. Every app that you add to it, everything that you do is all like ends up, you know, there's like a little cost here and there of doing that. And then if you're going to start advertising, which was really, I think the only way to really get sale, it's hard to get organic sales to a direct sales site. I'm sure there are ways to do it with like, if you're really good on TikTok or social media and things like that, I'm sure you can get organic traffic. But for me, it was more like Facebook ads right out of the gate. And so that's investment and, you know, upfront investment kind of stuff too. But yeah, for me, it started paying off pretty quickly though. So that was good. It started earning its keep right away, which is nice. And then there's been some months where it's been like a nice win, and other months where it's like, what? But as long for me, it's like as long as it's doing its job in keeping my backlist like nice and steady across all the other retailers, then I'm happy. So because I'm like, that's what I set out to do. You know, there's times when I'm like, I'm watching other people have these massive wins, and I'm like, why can't I be like that? But then I'm like, you know what? Your goal was this, and this is good. You know, it's like, and without, since I'm not spending so much time and energy and stuff on it, it's like it's giving me the bandwidth to work on other things too. So
there you go. So just for somebody that's completely new to the concept of direct selling, you sell books directly from your website, and you run ads to those book pages on your website. However, some readers will either choose to buy from you, or they'll then go and look for that book on their preferred reading platform, whether it's Amazon or Google or Nook.
Yeah, right. Exactly. That's exactly it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So even though the ad that you're paying for, you might not see it, you know, immediately as a sale on your website. Who knows? For, you know, later on that month, you might see it in that retailer platform.
Yeah, definitely. As soon as I started running the ads, I saw like on Amazon, my numbers start ticking up on those books right away. And it's interesting. Some convert quicker than others on that, which like the YAs seem to convert better on Amazon than my historical. So it's been odd. Some of them do better on Shopify than they do on, I don't know. It's weird. I don't know. It's weird how these things work, but I'm learning as I go. But I hope to get better at it. But at the same time, I'm kind of like I'm happy with it. It's a work in progress, you know, it's a work in progress.
There's only so much time.
Yeah, exactly. I was just going to say that. Do you have any help to do it? Maggie, you mentioned having Cameron's help, but do you have an assistant, or do you manage it all yourself?
No, I have an assistant who's been helping me with just helping me to stay on top of social media, because I'm really bad about doing that. I'm really bad about it. I'll just be like, oh, it's been 3 months since I've posted anything on Instagram. Maybe it's time, you know. So she's kind of helping me stay a little more consistent, which is nice. But other than that, no real help. But yeah, I don't know. I'm used to doing it alone over here in my it's fine.
Nothing wrong with that.
And so can I just ask, so you've got historicals and the young adults, are they all under the same pen name, under Maggie Dallen?
My Sweet Historical and YA are all under Maggie Dallen, yes. And then and then there's the Sophia Quinn one, and then I have a secret one for Steamy, which I think I might be killing off, which is a bummer, because it's making money, but I'm also like, I'm trying to get better about just focusing on what's working and you know, focus.
That's a whole podcast in itself, right? Learning how to say no and focusing on the right thing.
It's really tough. It's really tough. And I think that's one of the things with like direct sales. People were like jumping on it right away, and I was like, should I do it, or is this just is like another thing that's gonna distract, you know, like it feels like, or especially right now, it feels like you look around the indie world and it's like there's just so many ways you could be spending your time. There's so many ways you could be spending your time and your money and your whatever, you know. It's just like never ending, like, good Lord. So there's, you know, it's always like you could do subscriptions and newsletters and this and this, and I'm like, and you want I'm like, there's always like that shiny new toy part of me that just wants to try all of it, but I'm trying to stay a little more focused and Yeah. Right now it's, my priorities are screenwriting because it's been moving forward in a nice direction, and then keeping my Maggie Dallen name, which is the primary one, keeping that active and moving forward and growing. So through backlist and much less the front list.
How many are you looking to write for a year for Maggie?
I think this year it's going to be 6. I think between the Sophia Quinn ones and Maggie, actually it might not even be. Yeah, I think it might be more like 5 and a couple novellas between that. And then next year I think it might actually be like 4. So I'm trying to get down even more. So yeah, it's getting there though. But this year I'm on so far last year I made the same amount of money, or around about, but with like a quarter or a small fraction of the amount of books out that I had been putting out for so many years. So for me, that was a big win. It wasn't a big increase, but it was like, that was a huge win for me. It's the like fraction of the books and same thing. So now this year, my goal is to put out a small amount of books and maybe see an increase.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm working on now. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. So did you did you say how much you're selling your books for? Like, have we talked about price? No.
On the direct sales?
Yeah.
Most of the one that's been selling the best for me right now has been, I do bundles, and a lot of people have been doing like bundles that do direct sales because it's a higher price point. They still get a deal, but it's a higher price point, which makes it easier to sell, pay for Facebook ads. So the one that's been doing best for me right now is my historical bundle, which is 10 books, 10 full-length books, for $29.99 because it's half price. It's a 50% off bundle, and that one has been selling the best for me. So,
nice.
Yeah.
So you've got to think about that's interesting because I hadn't thought about that, the higher price items making the Facebook ads easier to make a profit on. So that's good.
Yeah,
it's a whole new world. I haven't done direct sales, so
no, and it is. I'm still learning too. I'm like, I don't want to sound like an expert on here because I'm definitely, and I know there's other people who are doing it with different ways of doing it. Like Cameron has his style that I've been following, and I know that there's people out there like Steve Piper and all these different people that have like their methods. So,
I saw Sky Warren's just launched a new course too.
Oh, really? So that's the thing.
So
I feel like everyone's got their kind of way of doing it, and I only know what Cameron's doing and what I'm doing. So I'm like really not knowledgeable other than just that tiny little sliver of what I know. But yeah, it's been working for me. But I do think, to your point before about why people are going to Amazon or Apple or whatever when they see it, I think that's probably part of the reason too. They don't want a bundle. They just want one book. And so they're like, oh, what's the name of that book? I'll just go get that one. And they're not, which, I think that's probably a case a lot of the times as well.
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. And so how many books do you think someone should have before they start considering this kind of a model? Like you've got 200.
Yeah.
Like if someone's
I know. The thing is, I don't think you need nearly even close to 200. No one needs that many books. Let's be honest. It's stupid. But I don't even want to answer that question because I feel like you guys should have Cameron on or somebody, or Anne Marie. She knows a lot more than I do on this one. But I will say, I don't think you need a ton. You need to have enough. You need to have enough that it makes it worthwhile, that you could, first of all, that you can bundle them, and that you can have other things for people to buy after the fact, because it's kind of like, what's the tail on this? Like, what's the, so I think it would behoove you to have more than one series, possibly. I would think, this is my guess. However, I don't think you need a ton, because the one thing is what I've been noticing, at least with Cameron's style, I can't speak to anyone else's, but we always tend to focus on one series or one box set or one bundle at a time. And like the more, if we try to do too many, it seems to just dilute things and whatever. So it's kind of just figuring out what's selling and then focus in on that one. So I don't think you need too many, because you're probably only going to be focusing on one series or one bundle at a time to advertise anyway. So it's not like you need to have 50 different books that you're selling. You just need to figure out how, and this is one really big change in a way of thinking for me, which is you don't have to have 50 books that can sell. You need to know how to sell one book. Like, and this is a different way for me of thinking after doing rapid release for so long, is like, just stop thinking about selling all of the books. find, pick, and I'm trying to do that too outside of working with him. Now I'm trying to look at like backlists and look at like one series and be like, what was the book that I loved the most in this series? What was the scene that I loved the most? Like try to really narrow down and figure it out. And that's definitely one of the lessons that I've learned is, if you can sell one book in your backlist, then you can make lots of money, if you can figure out how to sell it really, really well. But I think it's sometimes like the more books you have, the harder it is to even know where to start, and I think that was half my problem because I had this huge backlist and it was kind of like I could look, I looked back at it. It was like, I don't know what to do with you. I don't want to even like look back there. Let's just not even look at it because like, where do you start? So yeah, I think that's been helpful.
Yeah. And it's sometimes quite hard, I think, like for me anyway, as I look at a book and I've written it, I know the storyline, but I can't find that one scene. I can't figure out what that one thing is in there or that one moment. And that's really hard to kind of go retrospectively back and look at your books that you've written. I don't know.
It's meant a lot of rereading for me. It's meant me going back and sometimes like for better or for worse. There's some books I'm like, oh, I do like this one. And then there's other books and I'm like, oh my God, I published this, like, oh, but it's been interesting going back because you have to kind of delve back in and be like, what was it about this? That's great. But it's been useful learning lesson moving forward too, because now I'm kind of thinking about these things before I write it, which is really helpful. It's so much easier to sell a book when you know how you're going to sell it before, while you're writing it, or while you're writing a scene and you're like, oh yeah, this is going to be a scene that's, and it's like, it makes it much easier. I feel like it's much more like a holistic way of looking at it rather than looking at it as like, write the book and then think about marketing. It's kind of like, if you can kind of think about it all together as you're planning it, and, I think it makes it much easier overall.
Yeah. Or at least having one scene per book that is a juicy scene that you're going to be able to get in your marketing really easily. And it doesn't have to be a big scene. It's just that one thing that's going to draw people in.
It's like if it makes you go like, oh, I love this part, then it's probably going to make the reader be like, oh, I love it. That's what I'm starting to think.
I think that's an important thing to actually grab those scenes while you're working and keep them to one side.
Exactly. I'm getting better and better at doing that. Like as I'm writing, if I write a scene that I'm like, ooh, I love this part, then I'm like, oh, copy, paste, put it, and I just have this running document of scenes and that I can play with later. And it's definitely helpful. Makes things easier when you go to because you lose that perspective as soon as you finish. You're like, wait, what happened in this book?
100%.
It's hard to remember the name of the heroine, let alone like anything else, And
then you've got 200 of them, so then you're like, I know this happened somewhere, like, but which book was it?
Like I don't know. I don't remember anything that happened as soon as it's done. Like get out of my brain.
That's awesome. I think we're running towards the end of the interview time now, but we've had so much fun chatting to you today. It's
this
been
is
amazing.
The best. You guys are so nice to talk to.
You're inspirational, Maggie, just with your attitude and just, yes, your productivity, but also just, I think, celebrating, as you said, I've written down, celebrating the struggle. Maybe we could get a T-shirt with it on.
Oh my God! Yes,
fellow celebrators.
Maybe I'll start that on my social media and be like, "Look what I failed at this week."
It is just such an awesome. I think start a movement. There we go.
Right. Okay,
that's fantastic.
I'm on it. Well, this was great, you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Maggie. And so, if someone wants to find your books or find out more about you, where do they go?
It's a really good question. I guess I don't even know what my thing is. Hold on one second. Oh my God. MaggieDallenBooks.com. Thank you. I don't ever remember the name of my own website.
That's awesome. Okay, so Maggie Dallen Books.
Books.com, yes.
Awesome. Fantastic. And where can we be found, Char?
We can be found at spargirlspodcast.com, which will have our show notes in it with those links that we talked about in this podcast, and also on Patreon at Spargirls Podcast. If you'd like to come along and join our community where we're going to be celebrating the struggle.
Celebrating the struggle. That's our golden takeaway.
It's our new, I love that.
I love it.
Well, thank you so much, Maggie. It's been a delight to have you on and chatting with you today. And thank you all to all of our listeners for joining us for another episode of the Spa Girls podcast. We'll see you again next week. But for now, farewell.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.